Welcome to the RocketPD Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Murray. I'm a longtime education journalist and co-founder of RocketPD, here to bring you real talk with educators confronting what's broken in America's schools and hopefully offering up some advice and solutions about how to help fix it. Whether you're out to engage families, center students in their learning, or empower teachers and staff, we're going to cover the gamut, giving you ideas and frameworks that you can start using today. So what do you say? Are you ready to launch? Then let's get into it. In this episode of the RocketPD Podcast, I sit down with Dr. Susan Enfield, Executive Director of the Center for Educational Leadership at the University of Washington, and Will Krasnow, CEO of Swiftscore, an AI-powered teacher evaluation platform. Together, we unpack a tension every school leader feels. Teacher evaluation is supposed to drive growth, but it often feels like a compliance exercise, one that robs time from real coaching. Drawing on Susan's decades of leadership work and Will's early results with districts, we explore whether AI can actually help reclaim time, deepen feedback, and strengthen relational trust, instead of just doing the same old evaluation faster. At the end, we detail a cohort you can join to help lead the conversation around AI in your schools. This is a good one. I hope you'll stick around. Okay, so I have to tell you guys this story. So it was a couple weeks ago. I was at a party in Virginia for my daughter's school, and we're sitting there. We're just having a conversation, and a gentleman comes over to me and he says, "Were you? Is your name Corey?" And I say, "Yeah, my name's Corey." He says, "I was just on watching a podcast recently with Kim Marshall, who does a lot around teacher evaluation, and I saw you kind of this conversation that you were having with him." He was like, "I have to tell you this because it's been driving me crazy." He said, "We're in the middle of our teacher evaluation process, getting it started. I have 24 evaluations to do this year, and I can't get through 10 of them." And this is like a refrain that I keep hearing from folks is, we just don't have time to do our evaluations. We want to do more than evaluate our teachers for the compliance piece. What we'd love to be doing is sitting in the room talking to our teachers about what they could be doing or ideas that we have for them to improve the coaching that's taking place. But we can't even get to that conversation. And this was my friend John. This is what he was saying. We can't even get to that place where we're having great conversations with our teachers and doing the work that we really want to do because we're so stuck on just trying to get through these evaluations. And so we had this long conversation about this for a couple of hours. And I told him all of the stuff that we'd been doing around teacher evaluation. Will, I told him about some of the work that you are doing. And I just want to have this conversation today. And Susan, I really wanted to bring you into it. You've been a superintendent. You're now working for the Center for Educational Leadership in the University of Washington. This is something that you guys are paying close attention to. And, before we kind of get into how do we fix teacher evaluation, I just want to ask the question, why is the system so broken?
Well, having been a high school teacher and a chief academic officer and then a superintendent for 13 years, I think that I think there are probably multiple answers to that question. But what sort of comes to mind for me is we have unfortunately focused evaluation on those who need the most help. Or evaluation has been linked inextricably to lower performing professionals. The reality is good evaluation has been and always should be about professional growth. But given, and you mentioned this in your story, Corey, given the limitations of time that our administrators have in our schools today, it's just not a realistic ask for them to spend time on every evaluation from the standpoint of how am I helping my colleagues here learn and grow. And the reality is that all human beings, I believe, have a desire to learn and get better. And the time just isn't set up in the day. And I don't know that we've really had the tools up until now to make it more efficient and meaningful. And that's why I'm so excited about this conversation.
Yeah, I think you described it once as like we were having a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and you said performative at best, right? It's not really about improving practice at this point. How do we get to a point where we really can start to think about, not just the performance piece, the sense that we need to get through all these evaluations. Like my friend John said, he said, 24 evaluations and I can't get through 14 of them. I'm going through the motions as best I can. How do we get to a point where we can start to turn the conversation from that performance, that compliance, into some of that other stuff, that growth that you're talking about, Susan?
Yeah, and I would argue, Corey, that if compliance is the floor, right? So, continuous improvement and excellence in performance is where we want to be. And so if we've created a system where compliance is the most we can hope for, that's just not a place where you're ever going to get people performing at their best, right? Because where's the inspiration? Where's the sense of doing better? And I would also just add, and then I'll turn it back to you. I think we look at, unfortunately, because of the time constraints, I think we look at the evaluation as the end point. It should be the jumping off point for continued learning and development. And it should be bigger than just the individual. It should be informing the larger system and leadership in the system around how they can be designing learning opportunities for people at all levels.
When we use the word evaluation, it's kind of a loaded word. I don't think teachers really love necessarily, quote, the idea of being evaluated. If we were to wipe the slate entirely clean here, right, and say, what should this process be? Would we start with evaluation or would we start with something else?
Well, I've always said, having been a leader, sorry, Will, am I not letting you get a word in edgewise? Just
no,
cut me
100%.
off at some point. Having been working at the district level many years ago when there was such a push on teacher evaluation systems and making them better. And, I think that was probably the beginning of us attempting to build a better system, but inadvertently building a more onerous system. And one of the things that I always did was I tried to make the term professional growth and evaluation one word. So we never talked about evaluation standalone. It was about professional growth and evaluation, because that's the piece that I think matters the most. And, and I think that how we focus on this notion of continuous improvement versus a gotcha, because I think that, and frankly, Corey, I think most human beings have an innate sense of fairness. They want to be treated fairly. So I want to have a level of confidence in the person evaluating me that they're doing it from, in a responsible and fair way. And I'm not sure that we've been able to guarantee that at scale up until now.
Yeah, Will, I'd love to bring you in here just for a second to talk a little bit about some of the work that Swiftscore is doing in districts and some of the things that you're seeing as you bring new ideas and approaches to evaluation into these conversations. I know that you're using AI as a way, sort of an assistive tool to help principals and to help school leaders evaluate with more efficiency so that they can get to some of those coaching points and spend more time talking with each other. How is that work going, and are people receptive to it?
It's going great. It's going really great. People are receptive because I think the bar, to Susan's point, has been put really, really, really low. I mean, we've only been in market for 6 months now. We're working with over 100 schools. We're bringing together 100 different districts over the course of the year. And in part, I think my team does really, really great work. In part, I think people are ready for a change. And depends on the state that you're at. There's a lot of changing legislation, opening up opportunities to really reimagine these systems. I'm thinking about two words that Susan said. The first one is human. I mean, teachers aren't asking for that much here. They're asking to be treated like humans, right? What do they want? They want to be treated fairly and be supported. That's pretty much it. It's not like there's these tall orders here. Yet at the same time, every time we work with a district, there is this extreme tension with teachers and with unions, because to your point, Corey, evaluation itself is a word that is loaded. And it's because I think these systems have not treated teachers as human. People are upset about that for very good reason. The second word that I really think about that Susan mentioned are really the concept of support and bringing together professional learning and evaluation together. One of the things that both Kim Marshall has said, and my friend Scott Murray, former superintendent, says as well, is good feedback is a gift, right? Like when somebody, just outside of formal evaluation systems and district, when somebody, says, hey, like, have you thought about this? Or I love the way you're doing this, but one of the things that I do is this. If that's done thoughtfully, like, that's awesome. And I think most people appreciate that, because good feedback is support and it's caring about where you're going. When it's evaluation, it's this isolated moment, it's this gotcha. It is entirely not a gift. Bad feedback is just the worst. And so the question Swiftscore has had is, how can we flip the worst to a gift? We are spending so much time evaluating people. It's not just teachers who are upset. The principals, the instructional leaders are tired. You mentioned you started with an instructional leader, Corey, right? You can't get through all of his evaluations. It's like we're spending so much time doing this, yet everyone is upset. There are very few things, I think, in the world where everyone is upset about something and we're working really hard on it. It's usually one or the other. And how can we introduce AI in a way that brings us back to really all three of those things, right? Can we be more human? And how could AI make us more human? It's because we're spending more time in person having conversation. Can it help us stand for growth and support? Because if I, as an instructional leader, am not scrambling to get 24 evaluations that each take me an hour to write, can sit down and have a conversation, well, then we can actually work on growth, as opposed to like, just here's this piece of feedback I'm going to throw at you via email. And then the third is, of course, time, right? Like no one really needs to be convinced that AI can save quite a bit of time.
Can I just extend that? I agree with everything Will said. I think it's about being human, but it really comes down to relationships, because I want to go back to the fairness piece. Fairness is connected to trust. Trust is not like instant soup. You don't add water and it materializes within seconds. Trust is built over time, and it's built through relationships. So if AI can help us, maximize our time to focus on the relationship, so that the relationship between the evaluator and the person is one built on trust, that's powerful. Right. And that's a powerful use of AI to help us focus more on, to build on Will's point, the human experience, and make this process a lot more meaningful.
I'm going to press on that for a second, because I think this was on my notes as well, this idea of what we call relational trust. Kim Marshall talks a lot about this in some of the work that we do together. And I think if you're an educator and you're listening to this podcast, it almost might sound counterintuitive on its face, right? We're talking about artificial intelligence, and yet we're talking about humanizing the process. So let's press into that for a second. And let me ask Will specifically, how does something like AI really help in this instance to humanize a process that has become so bogged down by compliance? You would almost think, wait, you're introducing a machine to humanize a process? That's interesting.
Right. And that is often our first kind of question that we get. The simplest answer is more conversations. If we can have more conversations, it's obviously more human. Notably, AI can't have your conversation for you. It can't, it won't. Nobody wants that. It never will. But if it can help us springboard to the conversation faster, which we know, and Susan, you can correct me, but I believe the one research-backed practice that actually improves teacher growth is having real, frequent, and instructionally aligned conversations. If we can do that, those are the few instances we've seen where teachers are actually growing from these observation, evaluation, and coaching systems. And what's also really worth noting is that because AI can't have the conversation for you, neither can Swiftscore. And so Susan and I were just talking about this morning. It's like there is this really interesting thing that's happening with the districts that we're working with, which is to do this right, it involves both the tool, but also thoughtful initiative or process. And it is about not only what tech that you're getting behind, it is how you are getting behind it. Because AI is wickedly powerful. It is an immense resource, but it can be used wrong. I mean, if you're using Swiftscore or any other AI platform and you're copying the feedback that it generates and you're sending it via email, there's no way it will drive trust. Like everyone's going to know it came from AI, and then everyone's going to be more pissed, and we're going to get it done faster, but worse. But if we can actually talk, then who cares how we got to the conversation? Like, who doesn't like having a good conversation and giving feedback as a gift?
And sorry, Corey, could I just...
That's all right. I was just going to ask you, Susan, are people ready for this?
Oh yeah, I think so. So we've talked about sort of that people want to be seen as humans first. We want to be treated fairly, all of those things. But I want to bring up something that we at Cell talk a lot about, which is this concept of expertise. And we believe strongly that expertise matters. And I believe that part of this movement, and I think we could call it a movement, right, to actually transform, or to use Will's term, reimagine professional growth support and evaluation, is I think this notion of acknowledging that teachers and principals and those who work, they have tremendous expertise and they want to be acknowledged and honored and respected for it. You know, we've got to do away with the old adage, those who can do, those who can't teach. You know, let's just call BS on that once and for all. And let's sort of use this moment to not just sort of help our educators hone their expertise, but highlight their expertise. Because, you know, as Will and I were talking about earlier, we don't have, sadly, enough people lining up to be teachers. So how can we also make this moment and this movement an opportunity to make the teaching profession one that people get excited about again, like I was when I was 7 years old and teaching my stuffed animals, and like I was many years later when I walked into my first high school classroom as a high school English teacher. So how do we sort of capitalize on that? So I really want to talk about this notion of expertise. And I also want to talk something else. And Will talked about what the research says about what sort of meaningful work in this space looks like. I would also cite not just Cell's focus on expertise, and we know what research says about the importance of expertise, but also sort of the work of my friend and colleague Meredith Honig, which Meredith's research has really sort of landed on this idea that, teachers, principals, heck, superintendents, they need to lead their own learning. Now, that doesn't mean that the system abdicates and it becomes a free-for-all. Hey, you pick and choose what you learn, right? I mean, that's not what it is. But how do I have a say in designing my learning plan and the areas that I want to focus on in partnership with my supervisor or evaluator? And I think there's tremendous opportunity there to help people lead their own learning and feel empowered. So no longer is this notion of having someone coming in to give you feedback and evaluating to something that's done to you. It's something that's done with you that then you can sort of use to, push yourself and your own expertise and practice. That's powerful. And I think that's a compelling proposition for educators that I know.
I have a friend across the river here in Prince George's County, Maryland. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia. He's been an English teacher for 25 years. He's kind of rounding out his career. And he said, I asked him, why are you leaving? He said, I have to jump through a lot of hoops, I feel like, in my work, and I don't necessarily feel like the administration always respects my intelligence as an educator. The opinions that I have formed over years, people don't seem interested in hearing them. I hate to hear that from an educator that's been around, and I know that there is that feeling that like you can't beat the system in a lot of ways for folks who have been in it for a long time. Is this tool, is this movement something that can finally get us to a better place in terms of that conversation?
Well, can I just say, sorry, Will, I just want to say, I do have a wondering around that teacher's comment, which I get and I know is valid. And relative to this conversation, I'm sure for some administrators, the lack of interest or desire to hear directly from teachers may very well be the case. But I would argue more often than not, it goes back to the time issue. It's not that I don't want to engage meaningfully with my staff. It's that I just have only so many hours in the day. And so this, I think, is a direct way, as we talk about reimagining this process, this is a way to do away with that. So teachers do feel like they have a voice and a say in their own learning and in their school community.
It is. Principals were teachers too.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Amen.
It's not like they are this different species.
So we're superintendents, Will.
So we're superintendents, right? But it feels like it sometimes, right? And that's because these systems are hard, right? Like there's just not much time. I mean, we were talking to Kim about this stuff, and we were talking about how much of a lift it is to do observation evaluation the right way. If you have 25 folks that you are helping develop and grow, and and I was like, Kim, like there are folks with way more than 25, that they're helping develop and grow. It's getting harder and harder every day. And then schools are getting that much more complicated. It is in many, many instances not an expertise issue. It's maybe an issue to recognize expertise. It is a resource issue. And the one thing that AI certainly is it is a very powerful resource. It is. It can do things, right? As if you had more people on your staff. Now, how you use it, of course, not necessarily always good. All resources aren't used the same. But it is a resource, and that is what is very exciting about this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me visualize this for a second, Will? I mean, I know you're doing this with hundreds of districts at this point across the country. You've received a ton of feedback. I've seen the tool, Susan. I know that you've seen the tool. We're familiar with sort of the traditional evaluation process, and again, the length of time that takes, the amount of paperwork that is required, some of those frustrations that we mentioned at the outset of this conversation. What does it look like when people are leveraging tools like the one you've built, and how is it changing the tenor of those conversations in the districts that you're working with?
Yeah. I'm going to answer it first, the short answer and then the long answer. Short answer first is less time behind a desk writing and more time conversing, right? And I might sound like a broken record, but that is really all it is. It just keeps on funneling down to that. In the long version, right, I'm going to shout out Adam Hartman, a superintendent in Cannon City, Colorado, who we've been working with actually recently. Really amazing instructional team, very smart people, very engaged, work very, very hard to provide feedback. So you think, all right, so what is Swiftscore going to do here? Because these are one of the few districts that really kind of is in a good spot with this stuff. Like it's working. One of the things that we were talking about is his leaders are still spending hours writing evaluation. It's about thinking. They're thinking about, all right, what word, maybe how should what are the next steps to grow practice? What was good? What wasn't? And let me put that all in this really nicely written, thoughtfully created, meaningful essay, right? That's really long. And now that is very close to a gift. It is a gift, right? Like that is something really good. The tricky thing though is the question is how many teachers are reading it and learning from it. And again, our teachers Do they disrespect their principals? Probably not. Are they really, really busy? For sure. So even though there is a lot of great work happening, it is not necessarily translating into impact. And so what we've been able to do with them, as we've done with other districts, is say, hey, let us have most of observation and evaluation be spent in person. So step one is capturing the notes, right? Most of the time, folks are behind a desk, or not behind a desk, like sitting behind in the back of the room, computer open and typing and transcribing everything that's going on. We didn't expect this, but when we launched our transcribe feature, which is not a recording feature, it doesn't capture student and teacher voices, it just pulls down what was said as if it was taking notes for you. We thought it was going to be a useful feature. Like, we were not expecting it to be as important to the tool as it has become. Because imagine you're sitting there for 60 minutes trying to capture every single thing that was said, or maybe it's 30 minutes, right? Like, that is exhausting, and you're not really capturing much, like to actually internalize much. And so then, of course, it takes more time to read it back and then turn that into an evaluation. You click transcribe, you do one of the things Kim is always talking about, which is be present. Mm-hmm. Talk to students, walk around. Like, that's fun. Like, who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, he says smell the roses, right?
Smell the roses.
Yeah.
Right? But oftentimes in contract or in goals or initiative, we want to document evidence for very good reason. So this is a way to do both. Mm-hmm. Then you go back and you generate a standards aligned report on the platform, right? You're working with Danielson. You're working with Marzano. You're working with Cell 5D Plus. You will see scores and feedback, or just feedback if it's an informal, based on what you observed with that teacher. Sometimes we have users who get to this point and they say, it was kind of wrong though. And I'm like, yeah, it was, part of it was, we say it takes you 80% of the way. You don't really have to worry about the wording. It will be robust. It will certainly generate at least some new thoughts and direction. And it actually gives you guidance about how to have that conversation. Our folks engage with that. They edit the scores. They edit the feedback. And then they go and have the conversation because, they've had a little bit more ability to think it through, to know how to have it. It's in many senses PD for the principal themselves, especially when the district calibrates it to their initiatives and goals. But also because of time, right? I didn't exhaust that much energy in typing things out when I was in the classroom. And then when it came to coming up with the path forward, that was a lot quicker. There's a principal we work with named Kelly Espinoza from the Philadelphia School District. And one of the things that she says is principals aren't given a curriculum. They have to create the curriculum and then teach it when it comes to developing their teachers. And so this is a way to almost assist them in getting to the curriculum. Now, just like any other teacher would do, like they would engage with that curriculum, but then they have to go and do the meaningful work of actually helping their partner grow in partnership, right? And so that's what it does look like. And watching that happen and having an effective implementation in that way is really exciting.
Can I amplify something that Will just said? Sorry, Corey. But,
that's all right, Susan.
Sort of that process, that observation process. One of the things we at Cell believe is that you can't give good feedback, much less a good evaluation, unless you're a good observer first. Mm. And so, when we're working with our district partners, we really help leaders go in and observe, just truly observe, not judge. And it's hard because we're all a little judgy. Like, that's just human nature, right? We're all a little judgy. And if you've been a teacher, right, like you're going to have some feelings about what you're seeing. And so to really go in and I can tell you to sort of like, we work with folks just to script what you're seeing. You're right, Will. It's time consuming. And you know what? It's distracting because I'm getting so focused on, oh my gosh, did I write down everything that I just heard that student say? I'm less present. I'm not smelling the roses, right? To quote Kim, I'm not really observing the true interaction and the true student experience, which is what I should be focused on. What's the experience students are having in this classroom? And so if we can, help our educators and our leaders be better observers, and learn how to focus on wonderings and questions before judgment, that leads to much more powerful and effective feedback.
One of the things we talked about was in a previous conversation was this notion of career compression, right? This idea that a lot of administrators are not, haven't been in the jobs that long. They're developing as leaders as they're helping their teachers develop as teachers. That's an interesting phenomena, certainly one that we've seen a lot more of recently as careers have gotten shorter, as people have been moving in and out of the school system more. How can tools like this be helpful in that regard? Clearly, we're getting information from them that is useful, which is good. But again, you can't necessarily take it all, to your point, Will, verbatim. You have to kind of get in and know what's right and what's wrong. So how does that work when we're thinking about educators and particularly leaders who are new to their role?
Can I just say, Will, while you're thinking, let's help them get better faster. Right? I mean, ultimately, that's what we need to do here. And not by shortcutting, not by cutting corners, but like in a real way, how do we help them get better faster if we know that that's our reality? Sorry, Will, that was just like at top of mind for me as I was listening.
No, I'm with you, right? And this is one of those things where we really want the tool to be, like I mentioned, PD for the principal. Mm-hmm. PD for the superintendent, PD for everyone, right? We all have to learn. There's no, that is the one thing that's amazing about working with schools is everyone knows that, right? Like, you don't go to other industries and everyone's like, PD, because we believe in learning, right? And so one of the cool things about Swiftscore is we can pull in frameworks that are research-backed and supported. One of the things that we're talking about with Kim is we've been working on this sort of conversation facilitator. It's actually designed for when the principal and the teacher have the conversation. What if we transcribe that conversation, document that in 150 words, allow the principal and the teacher to look at that together, like computer open, edit it if they see fit. It would kind of pull down the next step. And then both parties sign off on it and they get it like an email saying that this conversation was had, et cetera. A great way to know if we're really having these conversations. But what's interesting is we've designed it so that the principal receives that email, but it also includes a little bit of feedback, right? Kim has 4 quadrants of how to have a meaningful conversation with your teacher. And so what if the AI gave you some I wonderings, And again, just as a principal to a teacher, the AI could be deeply wrong. But let's think about it, and have those moments of reflection.
I love this notion of sparks, right? It can spark conversations. It can spark ideas and turn these sort of formative engagements into a really much more collaborative process. That's a really interesting idea. One of the things I wrote down too, as you were talking about, the transcription, the listening feature that you mentioned, was unions. I think, sometimes I know that you get a lot of this questions about unions and their work with schools, and will they be receptive to this? How do you deal with that? Are they able to kind of see past some of those things so they get to that point we just mentioned, which is, really lifting up the educators and empowering them through this process?
If you don't engage them, no, they don't see it. And why should they? Because they don't know what they're seeing, and for very fair reasons, they see evaluation with a negative taste in their mouth because it's been negative, right? Now, when we've been able to engage the union before, during the process, complete 180. In fact, they actually really like it. Why? Well, because it is a great way, by transcribing the classroom, to limit bias. By having this AI kind of third party anchor some of these thoughts, or even if it's aligned to district initiatives, right, which we can calibrate it towards, eliminate bias of the principal, as opposed to looking at a teacher and saying, I know this teacher is good, or I know this teacher isn't good. Actually having thoughts, right? And then not only limiting bias, but actually personalizing feedback, which, sometimes we'll get somebody who's like, well, isn't AI, it's this tech thing, it'll be less personal. It can be really good. It's really powerful. And it's certainly better than maybe I have an Excel sheet with 3 categories, good, bad, and not, and somewhere in the middle. And I have templated feedback that I copy, marginally edit, and send to my teacher. This can be hyper personalized. And then when we start talking about the portal on the teacher side to facilitate growth and align PD, PL to specific growth journeys of the teacher. I have this goal for the year, or this was my weakness for evaluation. That can be quite exciting to teachers, because who doesn't want to grow and improve practice, especially when it's for students? And so approaching that head on with, again, to Susan's word, the spirit of partnership, and we're doing this all for this greater purpose, which again is students. And so let's work together to make this happen. We've never had that conversation, and it didn't go well.
Yeah.
You drew the line that I was hoping to make, right? Which is this connection, not just to the growth of the educator and to their commitment to, buy into this system and this approach to get better. But at the end of the day, how that translates to student performance and how that makes really, the entire circle stronger in a lot of ways. Can we talk a little bit about, what you're seeing relative to how this translates to really what we're going for, the output, the student output?
Well, we know that, with the first part of this work is getting to more meaningful conversations, because we know that helps teachers grow. The second half is that we know the research says the number one factor in impacting student performance, both from test scores, but also life outcomes, is the quality of the teacher that stands before them in the classroom. And so, to Susan's point, there's no such thing as coaching out anymore. That's not a thing, right? We don't have that. And we only have the option to help develop and grow our teachers if we want students to have better teachers, which of course we do, because we know that's the one thing that works. It is the number one thing. And when we have limited resources, we don't have the liberty or the luxury of having 3 ways we're trying to grow and stand for students. It's one of the things you say all the time in the entrepreneurship world. Pick the number one thing and press on as hard on that as you can, because it yields the most returns.
Mm-hmm. Corey, could I just go back to one of the things Will was talking about around the question of unions, and he talked about, engaging upfront and authentically in not just the what, but the how and the why. I would also offer that we need to, and this is because I'm a former English teacher, I think language matters a lot. And so you heard me say at the beginning, professional growth and evaluation, one word, right? So you're never just focused on evaluation. I would also say transitioning from professional development to professional learning, because development has an inherent sense that we need to develop you. Something's not quite right with you there. There's some deficiency. Whereas learning, we're all on a learning continuum of some kind. And so I think that focusing on, and that's the language that we use at Cell, is professional learning. in Highline, we had a promise to know every student by name, strength, and need. I believe every staff member, adult in our school systems wants and deserves the same. So how are we building systems of support and professional growth that make me as an educator feel known and seen, not just for where I need to grow and get better, but also what I'm good at? Getting back, Corey, to the veteran educator you mentioned, who's like, nobody wants to hear what I have to say. Like, my school doesn't value my voice. Like, they don't know what I'm really excellent at, and they don't tap into that to benefit, my school community. What a shame. And can we flip that around? And I think we can.
I'd add explore the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And explore how you can use them.
Yeah.
Right. Again, tool and process. They're too powerful to ignore. And I think we're past that point of saying, like, I don't need to think about AI. Mm-hmm. we're past it. And we also know the alternative of exploring the tools is having your staff explore the tools for you in disjointed ways without a strategic process associated with it. I.e., I go to ChatGPT, I put in my observation notes, I get something back that isn't necessarily calibrated, and I do what I do with it, which is TBD. Talk about frustrating unions. To me, that seems like a potential very unfun moment down the line, right?
Fair.
And so see what's out there, see what you could do to align everyone and how you use it.
I love that. I'm going to ask you, Will, because I know you are, you're doing some work with Penn GSE coming up here. You guys are having, putting together a cohort around this idea of reimagining teacher evaluation and the influence that AI can potentially have on that. You're walking into it from a place of research and understanding, asking questions about what works and potentially what doesn't. Can you tell me a little bit about that initiative, how it's going, and how people can get involved if they want to?
Yeah, I mean, because the part about exploring the tools is like, again, it's not, all right, I found this tool and now we're going to just use it and that's it, right? Exploring means exploring, which means learning and figuring out what works and how it works and what doesn't. And so folks who choose Swiftscore as a tool that they're looking to explore, folks that choose to work towards reimagining evaluation, we want to support that process. I mean, one of the things that we hear all the time is like, I wasn't planning for AI to happen. It's not like I baked in this time because this was our initiative for this year. It just kind of happened, right? So there's all this stuff going on. We want to support educators in the process of implementing this tech because in many instances, it's a lot to keep up with, right? And we'd like those insights to be very specific to them. So folks who use our tool will be looped into a research cohort that we're putting together in partnership with RocketPD and, as Corey mentioned, the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education. And it's a pretty simple study. What it's going to do is we're going to give access to your folks to use the tech. We're going to survey within the tool. It's very low lift and it's easy. And we're going to see insights across 3 different composite metrics. The first is principal, performance, and efficiency. Are we giving more feedback? Is that feedback stronger? Is that feedback in the form of conversation? The second is relational trust. Are we closer together or further apart because of AI? And then finally, teacher growth. Are we actually seeing indication that we're setting goals, achieving them, and then being better for our students? And so come the end of this study, and there are multiple phases of it, so you can get cued in with insights along the way, you'll have a sense of what's working and what isn't working when it comes to AI implementation in your evaluation system so that you can move now, because again, the alternative is probably worse, but then also iterate just as like a startup would, right? Iterate and adjust thoughtfully, because this stuff is super serious and it's worth knowing what's working and what isn't.
Cool. Susan, what do you think?
I'm here for it, Corey. I think this is an exciting time. I said this to Will when he and I first met. There's lots of questions and legitimate trepidations about AI and how it's influencing our lives. And I think there are maybe not some spaces where there's tremendous opportunity and excitement. And I think that this professional growth and evaluation space is one of those spaces. I mean, I think that to reimagine and transform the way we've done something that is so important, and do it in a way that elevates our educators and in turn helps them feel inspired so they can inspire our kids, right? You don't want someone who's feeling beat down in front of your kids every day. You want someone who feels supported and inspired and is hungry to learn. Let's nurture that. And I think we have the opportunity to do it now in a much smarter, more efficient and thoughtful way than ever before.
Well, that's very well said. I think that's probably a great place to wrap today's conversation. Susan, I want to thank you. Will, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. For those of you that are listening, if you're interested, I will put the link to the cohort that Will mentioned down below, and you can access it there. If you have questions or want to learn more, you can always reach out to RocketPD or to Swiftscore to learn more about what's happening in this space and with the cohort specifically. Susan, Will, I just want to thank you again. I hope we'll get a chance to keep talking about this very interesting topic and have you back real soon.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Will.
All right, friends, take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of the RocketPD Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Murray. We hope you found today's conversation insightful. If you enjoyed what you heard, consider clicking that like button and subscribing to our channel. You can download the RocketPD Podcast wherever you find your favorite pods. We're also on YouTube. Just search for RocketPD. At RocketPD, we're on a mission to empower the world's teachers and staff. To learn more about our work and the community we're building together, visit us anytime at rocketpd.com. If you're an educator and you're listening to this, remember, your work matters. So be well, do right, and let's keep up the fight.